My name is Marcia Buell, and I'm a assistant professor in the English department. And I want to talk to you today about a use of the discussion board that is maybe different than the way it perhaps had been imagined. I have been working with some ways to use it more to enhance the class discussion as well. As people are thinking of ideas differently, we'd like to give them an opportunity to share the information together. What I've found in a lot of my classes is that the group work often goes okay. People are engaged, they're trying to solve the problem, they're trying to think through the issues, but what ends up happening is when they have to share it, they end up somebody just kind of mumbles through and reads, this is what the group found out, and then somebody else says, this is what my group found out, and they can tune out from each other and not really listen to the really good ideas that they may have come up with. So I started playing around with the discussion board as a way to perhaps mediate that. In my classes, what I do generally is I might set up a thread or an activity where the students will use for discussion and it's related to the work they're doing. In this case, we started off with a classroom analysis, and this was to become active in noticing as a pre-writing skill, to notice what's around and how things are working. They were eventually going to do this in a further assignment in a larger way. But as a classroom activity, I asked them to work in a group and post their ideas together. And then if there was time, as a group, respond to another group's posts. So they had a discussion topic. I gave a number of questions about the room, questions about like the suitability for the activities we were doing, how well the room enhanced learning, the pleasantness, which nobody in this class addressed, but in other classes people had, or the technology. And they would just comment on that. I allowed anonymous posts because they were working in groups. So let's take a look at suitability. So I gave the prompt, it seems well suited or poorly suited for the class activities that we might do. And then the students worked together in a group for a few minutes. They talked about the different ideas. They took somebody took notes a little bit on what people were saying, or they tried to write ideas down. And then as a group, they posted their response. So like in this particular one, this was a room they liked. They talked about what was working, and then all three students signed it. One thing to be careful about is that if you do an in-class discussion and in-class discussion board, you want to make sure not just the student who posts, but the students who are part of it get credit for being involved. So sometimes I'll ask them in the title to put the names of all the students in the group. They sit together, they talk about the activity, sometimes they start to write it down. I try very hard to encourage them not to write until they've talked about the ideas. Before we do this, often the day before or in the morning, I will send an email asking people to make sure they bring some sort of technology to work with in class that can access D2L. They look at the prompt, they'll talk about it. In a case like this, I might ask different groups to respond to different prompts, but they will, so like each group has to respond to 2 of the prompts. So the group responds, they talk about it together, then they write up their ideas, they all get credit for that, and hopefully then other students can end up replying to what they said. But still, in general, it works really well as a way of following up a discussion. Students have a discussion, they talk about something, they could problem solve together, and then as a group they can offer their solutions. In addition to this, I also use Google Docs to do something very similar. If you go into your email and there's a little square next to the email, you can get to your Google Docs drive, and if you go into your drive, you could create documents that you can share with the class. In this case, I shared it with the entire class. There's 25 people in the class. I went into Newport, got their NEIU email addresses, copied them in, and went through the share procedure. Prior to the class, I will set up a Google Doc, something I want them to respond to. In this case, we were working with writing processes, and so I selected some problems that students might often have with a writing assignment. And the students can then give each other advice about how to address the problems. So one problem I thought we might have a student who says, I have no idea where to begin. And I think somebody responded, yeah, I know how you could begin. And then they gave some advice, like, think about the topic and make a list of ideas and then just free write. So this is a potential student problem, and this is advice that other students might give. I asked them to sit together, to work in groups for a few minutes, or if they wanted to work individually, show them how to get to the document, and then ask them to offer advice for several different categories. The nice thing about this is that the advice sticks if they could always access it again. So let's say a student expresses a problem of, and I hear this sometimes in class, how will I ever get to 2 pages or 5 pages or 10 pages or however many, and so some of the fellow students or other students in the class gave advice. So they would talk together, and then maybe one group would write down everything that comes, and then go back and see if everything fits. And the other person also wrote about the importance of putting details in, noting that there's a story to be told. So here's a nice example of at least 2 students, if not maybe 2 groups, all offering advice. And then since the students have access to the document, they can look back at it at any time.